What's going on, everybody? This is another episode of the Hot Conversations with School Leaders podcast. Today, first off, I want to let you know we've got some good interviews, great interviews that are coming around, coming forward. Got some individuals who I think have a lot of good nuggets to help you in your journey and being a leader. Last time we were together, I talked about the 9 responsibilities that every leader needs to know. So check out that episode because I think it's very important for you to understand as a leader that some things are definitely choices, but you've got to accept those choices and responsibilities in order to get into your building and actually lead people the right way. So if you remember, that acronym is civic duty. And so that is compass. You got to know where you're going. I is invest in your people. V is visibility. I is inspect what you expect. So in that regard, we're talking about accountability. The last C is communication. I'm actually into a book right now called Crucial Conversations, which is very powerful. And these are definitely skills that you need to know as you communicate as a leader. Then duty, D is delegate. U is uplift. T is time management. And Y is you. You got to take care of yourself. So I don't necessarily put those in order of importance. They are just things that you need to understand are your responsibilities. And if you can become proficient in those, especially if you can master those, you're going to see incredible things happen in your building. So today, what we're going to talk about are the 5 questions that every school needs to be able to answer in order for students to learn and succeed at high levels, right? That's the point of education. Safety is not necessarily the goal. Communication isn't necessarily the goal. Being a school that everybody likes is not the goal. The goal of a school is for students to learn at high levels and ultimately to go into their community, into the world, to be productive citizens, do great things, go further than we were able to go, right? So that's the goal of a school. All those other things that I talked about before that are really strategies, right? So safety is not the goal, but safety is essential because if a student feels safe and staff feels safe, the community feels safe, they're going to come in and be more able to learn and do their jobs effectively, right? So the goal isn't safety. However, as one of my friends says, safety first because safety second just doesn't make sense. So we got to make sure our kids are safe psychologically. We got to make sure kids feel safe physically because when they do that and when they do feel safe, they're going to walk in the building and be more able to learn. So again, our goal is for all students to learn at high levels. So what does high levels mean? I worked with an angel of an individual. Her name was Becky Dufour. And Becky Dufour and her husband did amazing work with what are called professional learning communities. I am a full proponent of professional learning communities. Another word for that is just working together, right? When you work together, what does the word team mean? Together, everybody achieves more, right? So when you work together and the kids go from being my kids to our kids, when you do that, again, you're going to see yourself grow as an instructional leader, grow as a person because you're not in a silo just trying to do everything on your own. And you're also going to see your kids do well because you're going to pull ideas from other people that you can use with your students and help them grow. So the goal of a professional learning community, especially in the mindset of the adults, is to shift from my kids to our kids, shift from me to we, right? We need to get to a point as a school where all hands on deck, we're all going to do what's best for kids, want to give our all every day, and we're going to take care of each other. I know growing up, one of the things my father used to tell me all the time was, you and your sister may get into issues with each other, but no one else better mess with your sister. Like, period. In a discussion, not even a conversation. And I believe that's how we need to be in a school. As a team, as a championship team, when we come into the building, we're for each other. We may not always like each other. We may not always be on the same page, but that kind of goes back to that crucial conversation book, right? We got to get to the point where we learn how to communicate with each other and also know why we're here, right? Some of the reasons organizations don't grow or achieve their goal is because they don't even know why they're here. Like, why do we exist? And so once we know why we exist, we now start looking at, okay, do we have the resources to do what we need to do? Do we have the skill sets to do what we need to do? Do we have a plan? How are we communicating? What are our protocols? What are our policies? What are our procedures? But we first got to know why we're here. So again, today, I'm going to talk to you about the 5 questions that you need to be able to answer. And if you can answer those questions, you're going to be on your road to success. So question number one is, do we believe that all students can learn at high levels? All right. That's the number one question. Number one question is not, do you have the resources? The number one question is not, what time does school start? The number one question is not, what is your master schedule look like? The number one question is, do you even believe that all students can learn at high levels? You first got to believe before you start to do, and then after you do, you'll start to have what you wanted in the first place. So, what does that mean that all students learning at high levels? Do you believe that all students in your building can learn at grade level and beyond? Right? Do you look at students and you automatically start either tracking or putting students in pots to say, hey, these are the students that probably aren't going to make it this year? So this is what we're going to do with them. Here are the students who are cool, they're good, they're going to be okay, and here are our students who we know they got it, right? If you're, especially in the United States, with all the accreditation accountability, do you already put kids in your red, yellow, green, or your green, yellow, reds? The green are the ones who, yep, we know they got it. The yellows are the students who are like, hey, if we can get these students over the hump, they're going to go to our scores. And then you got the students who are in red, where it's just like, hey, let's just make it through the year. We want to make sure that they feel good at school. One of my friends said, we can love kids to failure, right? We can look at some of the kids who we just don't believe are going to be great. We may not say that, but our actions show it. Please know that your actions show way more than your words. So when you say that we love kids, and then at the same time, you're not putting kids in opportunities to succeed, or you're not pushing kids, then really I would question whether you love them or not. What may be happening is you just don't want them to fail. You don't want them to feel bad about failure, when in truth, failure is just a part of life, right? That's how you learn, right? The reason you learned how to ride a bike is you fell off a couple times. And from that falling off, you then learned as you got back on the bike, how to maneuver the bike, how to balance on the bike. The actual worst part of everything would have been if you had failed and then not gotten back on the bike, right? Because then you would never have learned. So it's okay for our students to struggle. It's okay for everybody not to have an A all the time. The goal is, are they learning, and are we putting our kids in position through our policies and procedures to be able to fall down, get back up without judgment, and keep teaching them, right? Keep working with them. So again, the first question is, do you believe that all kids can learn at high levels? And we define high levels as grade level and beyond. If you have that audacious belief that every kid in your building, if this is the floor, that every kid can meet that floor, and we're going to push our kids even meet higher than the floor, you've got to have that mindset before you start talking about the other four questions, which start to go into your procedures, your policies, and how you help students learn. If you don't believe that, then your policies and procedures will show that. I guarantee you, if anybody really believes in kids and that they can learn, they can definitely walk into a building and tell if that building believes it, right? It's just going to be the actions. It's going to be the conversations, how we talk about kids. It's going to be the conversations, how we talk about each other, right? It's going to be the conversations, how we talk about our community, our parents. It's going to be in our conversations about how we talk about central office. It's going to be in our conversations, how we look at kids, how we teach in our classrooms, how we group kids. Your actions are going to show whether or not you believe that all students can learn at high levels. So if you don't believe that, the next four questions, I'll be honest with you, in my mind, truly don't matter, because you don't believe all kids can learn anyway. So why would you do the extra work to try to get the ones that you would put in the yellow and definitely in the red? However, if you do believe that all students can learn, if you do believe that all students can learn at high levels, and that's grade level and beyond, the next four questions are critically important, right? So question number two is going to be, what do we want kids to learn? Right, that kind of goes back to that compass thing when I talked about civic duty. What do we want kids to learn? Again, if you're in the United States especially, but maybe in other countries as well, you may have a curriculum that your government has given to you, and they say you got to learn all of this by the end of the year. If you're like me, I was a social studies teacher for about 7 years. When you would look at everything, you'd be like, there is no way in the world, no way at all that we can get through all this material. At least there was no way we could get through all that material in depth, right? You couldn't really go deep. You could go deep in some things, but other things you just wouldn't be able to do. So again, we had an individual that we worked with when I was a principal in Lynchburg City Schools, and her name was Becky DeFore. And one of the things she's taught us about is the guaranteed and viable curriculum. All right, the guaranteed and viable curriculum. What does that mean? You've got to be able to look at all of your learning targets that your state or your school is asking you to do, and actually start to, instead of putting kids in different pots, you got to put those targets in different pots, right? You got to be able to say, hey, what are the things that we know our kids have to know before they leave? Period. Again, I always say this, period, end of discussion. They got to know this because they got to know it for my class, and they've got to know it for when they leave, right? So an example of that would be if you're in elementary school and letter recognition, right? That's just something kids got to know. They got to know that before they leave us, because that's going to impact the rest of their life, right? Being able to recognize letters. So you got to know that. So in our building, what we call those are the boulders. Boulders are those huge rocks that we know kids got to know for my class. And in reality, probably going to have to know that for the rest of their life. All right. So that's the first level. The second level are the rocks, right? These are things that are important for my class. They may be important for other classes as kids go through school, but not necessarily that those things are going to be like, man, if they don't know this, they're just not going to be able to succeed, right? Not necessarily that, but they are important for the class. And some of those things are uh, little items that are going to impact, other units later on in the school year. So those are the rocks. The last things are the butterflies. So again, we break them up into boulders, rocks, and butterflies. The butterflies are the things that I'm going to be honest with you. If we don't get to it this year, it's okay. I mean, just being honest, if we don't touch it this year, I'm not going to say if they never hear this, they're going to be okay. Butterflies are things that I can just put a video on real quick, make sure my kids see it. I can look at a poster. One of the things, and some people will probably argue with me, I think the preamble is something that you really, really need to know. In the grand scheme of all the information I had to teach as a social studies teacher, we had to get through that pretty quick. So a great thing that I would do is I would just put on Schoolhouse Rock. We would do probably a 20-minute to 25-minute lesson. We would go through the words, start talking about what different words mean. Vocabulary is key. People say vocabulary is the gateway. If you don't know words, how are you going to be able to learn in school, right? So we would go through the vocabulary, and then after that, I would put on Schoolhouse Rock. We would learn the song. I kid you not, the whole year the kids knew it. And we did that at the beginning of the year. I could ask a question about the preamble. The whole year kids got it, but it wasn't a long lesson. It was quick. We moved on. If they had not necessarily gotten a preamble, I don't think it would have destroyed anything in school. Like, they would have been okay. So that was a butterfly. So remember, the boulders are things you gotta have, period, non-negotiables. The rocks are things, these are really important. We need to get to it. And then the butterflies are things that, hey, may not get to it this year. When you break those things up into those pots, you then are able to start to say, okay, we know that these are the boulders. So now, how are we looking at our schedule throughout the year to make sure we spend the most time and the most efficient time and the most effective use of resources to make sure kids know this? We're going to spend our time making sure that they know this. They got it. They understand it. If we got to reassess and reteach, we're going to reassess and reteach. We're not moving on till our kids know it. We're not. We as the professionals said that this is a boulder. So if we as the professionals are saying this is the boulder, then we as the professionals need to make sure our kids get it. Remember, as educators, it's not just okay that we teach kids. That kind of goes back to question one. It's not just okay that we teach. Our job is to make sure that they've learned. So if our goal is just to say that we've taught it, then we can give information and just move on. And at the end of the day, it's the kids' fault, right? They should have got it when I taught it. If we are saying these are boulders, and even with the rocks, we say this is important, we've got to make sure they've learned it. Okay? So, got to make sure we put all the learning targets in pots. We got to know whether they are boulders, rocks, and butterflies. After you look at the learning targets, you got to make sure you understand what is the rigor level that the particular learning target is asking you and asking you to teach your students, and that they learn at, right? So if the learning target, some call that Bloom's taxonomy, you've got different versions and different verbs that are used. But if the learning target is asking kids just to remember, that means they're just memorizing facts. Then when you are teaching that, then you need to be teaching at that level to make sure kids are successful. If the learning target is asking students to be able to analyze something, then you need to be teaching on that level so students are able to learn and do the verb that it's asking them to do. If the verb is asking them to create, then you need to be teaching on that level. Kids got to be able to create. One of the mistakes I've seen is we'll teach at a remember level something that was supposed to be at a create level. It may have needed to start at a remember level, but we've got to get them to the point where they're able to create, right? Whatever that verb is. So when we look at that first question, what do we want kids to know? We're doing a couple of things. We're making sure our learning targets are in pots. We are then making sure that we're teaching on the rigor level. We understand that rigor level as the educators. Last thing we're going to do is we're going to have to create our schedule of how we're teaching, right? As a team, as a professional learning community, we need to all be on the same page, teaching on the same timeline. We don't necessarily need to teach the same way. So we need to be on the same timeline, we don't need to teach the same way. So some may say, well, why not, right? If we're all doing on the same timeline, then shouldn't we teach the same way? I would submit to you that you shouldn't, because the goal in a professional learning community is to grow yourself as a professional, right? So if I have a partner who is teaching the same information one way and another partner who is teaching it another way, when we get to our assessment of how students are learning, we get to learn from each other. What did you do that got your students to learn this at such a high level, right? So it's a difference if all of us give the assessment and all of our kids, members shifting from me to we, all of our kids don't do well. We got to come back to the drawing board and figure things out. But if 30% of my kids don't do, or only 30% of my kids understand this material, but 90% of yours understand the material, ego has to go out the door, right? It cannot be a, man, well, I'm going to figure it out. No, work smarter, not harder. You need to go to your teammate and say, hey, what did you do that got your kids to learn it? Because I want to make sure that our kids get this. All right. So again, you should be on the same pace. That doesn't mean you have to teach the same way. All right. I'm going to move on to question number 3. And question number 3 is, question number 2 was, what do we want kids to know? Question number 3 is, how do we know that the kids have learned it? All right. This goes to your assessment. Biggest thing I'm going to push here is your assessment needs to have enough questions that you're able to see that a student can be proficient or is proficient and or has mastered the material. And also your questions have to be at the rigor level that the learning targets were at. So again, if you taught on a create level, but you assessed on a remember level, not good. If you taught on a remember level, but you're assessing on a create level, not good. Whatever that rigor level is, you got to make sure that it is the same from your teaching to the assessment. All right. Same from your teaching to the assessment. That way, as a team, when you all come together, you can actually see if kids are proficient and have mastered what it is you taught. Question number 4 is, what do we do for those students who aren't proficient and haven't mastered? All right. We've got to help them. Remember, as the professionals, we said that these are boulders, these are rocks, and these are butterflies. So when we look at the assessment and we have students, which you invariably will, who aren't mastering the material or aren't proficient in the material, what you then have to decide is, how are we going to help them? I had a great mentor for a couple of years. His name was Thomas Maney. He also worked with Becky Dufour, and he would always say it's not teaching or reteaching louder and slower, right? So when we talk about reteaching something, it's not louder and slower. We don't need to yell, and we don't need to just slow down the same way we did it. Obviously, I've already taught it. And obviously, if they didn't learn it, there was something flawed, maybe, in how I taught it. So I've got to figure out, remember, we're working together as a team. Is there anybody in our group who taught this well? Once we know what they did, there's 2 ways to go about this. Either I get their lesson, I reteach, and the next important thing is, and I reassess. So it's not reteaching and then just move on. It's reteaching and then reassessing to see who is actually proficient and mastered. Or another tool that you could do is, let's say you all have classes at the same time. Are you able to switch kids? So, hey, you take the students who have mastered and show proficiency. I'll take the kids who haven't. I'll teach the lesson. I'll work with them. That way you have the ability to just focus on those students who need the support. You can also in your classroom work in groups. So those students who have show proficiency and mastery, you can do an assignment over here while you're working with those students who need to be retaught and reassessed. Please don't complicate this. So you don't need to be like, all right, I've got to come up with a ridiculously crazy lesson, and then I got to come up with another 25 question assessment. No, you do not. You can just get those students for a good 25 minutes, 30 minutes, and it could be 3 questions, 4 questions that you go through and you just want to see have they mastered it. Okay, so don't complicate it. Assessments don't have to be 25 question, long tests. It could be a thumbs up, thumbs down. It can be go outside, let's talk it through. Like whatever is necessary for you to know. The goal is at the end of the day, you just got to know that they learned it. Okay. The last thing, and a lot of times I think in education we miss this, is what are we doing for the students who actually learned it? Please know this, as good as you are as an educator, there are going to be kids who know more about your subject than you do. They do. Maybe that's because their parent is a master at that subject. Maybe they're just a good reader. Maybe they just have a gifting in that particular area. But not every kid that comes into your room necessarily needs you to teach it to them. They don't. All right. I've been in many classes where a kid will come in with way more knowledge about something than me. So the goal now is, what are we doing for those students who have already mastered, how are we taking it and extending the learning for them? All right. Again, work smarter, not harder. You are on a team. You're a part of a professional learning community. All right. So come up with different activities that are going to extend the learning. All right. Take it past the floor. Right. We're going to go to high levels. Also, I will tell you this: don't assume that those students who didn't master at first can't get to the point where they can do the extension work. The goal is I want everybody to do the extension work at some point. All right. I don't want to keep this group over here because you didn't master and this other group over here. I want everybody to get to that point. That goes back to the B, that mindset, right? Do I believe that all students can learn at high levels, grade level and beyond, from the floor to the ceiling? All right. We're not underneath the floor, right? We're taking kids as high as we can possibly get them to. All right. So these are the 5 questions. Remember, do you believe that kids can learn at high levels? Question number 2, what do we want kids to know? Question number 3, how do we know that they know it? Question number 4, what do we do with kids when they're not showing proficiency or mastery? And then question number 5 is, what are we doing for those students? And how do we extend the learning for the students who do show proficiency and mastery? I'm telling you, if you can answer those questions and you can do that consistently, right? You know that information, it'll get you laser focused on kids so that you can help every kid by name and by need. All right, that's the last nugget I'll give you. In your building, look at kids by name and by need, not by percentages. If you look at kids by percentages, you're going to leave kids behind. If you look at kids by name and by need, then it's going to be hard work, all right, but it's going to be worthwhile work. All right. Hope you have an incredible day. Please subscribe, check this out, watch the podcast. Join me on Instagram, join me on TikTok. Try it every day just to give us as leaders encouragement, challenge us, and inspire us to do great things for kids, for our staff, for our community every single day. All right. Love you. Stay hot and keep leading.